Welcome to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast with Jacob Ayers, providing actionable content to help you along your journey to financial freedom through real estate investing. As the premier asset class, real estate has helped ordinary people just like you amass fortunes. The benefits of passive income from real estate investing will allow you to live a life you want. And now your host, entrepreneur, real estate investor, and apartment deal syndicator, Jacob Ayers.
Hi, and welcome to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast, episode 342. Hey, welcome back. I'm your host, Jacob Ayers. I'm excited to introduce to you today our guest, Dave Holman. Dave is an entrepreneur, real estate investor, and a man on a mission to use real estate to solve problems and improve communities. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Jacob. I'm honored.
It's our pleasure. Well, Dave, will you start by kind of telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, your background, and kind of your experience in the whole real estate investing world, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you the long version.
All right.
Born and raised in the great state of Maine, so pretty rural, upbringing. Didn't come from a real estate family, just kind of middle class, went to public school here, really enjoyed it. And, did sports. I was into cross country running and Nordic skiing. So a theme, throughout my life is kind of like long distance.
I like it.
Endurance, stuff. So those were the things that really turn me on. But the neat thing about them too is that even though they're very individual sports, they're also team sports, where you have teammates and you build, the results together, not just alone. Went out to Carleton College in Minnesota. So got a great dose of the Midwest, which I loved. And out there, I took a class called Building the Eco House by an architect who was the head of facilities there. And that completely turned me on to the power of real estate to kind of change the world and what it can do, and learning about old, inefficient building techniques and what, is coming around the corner in terms of LEED standards and efficiency, and, how if you build a big building right, you can heat it with a toaster, basically.
Yeah.
So that was really eye-opening for me. Spent the next 4 years down in Bolivia. I had met a young woman down there. We started dating. We're now married with 2 kids, so it went pretty well. And we started a chain of bookstores and camping stores down there, actually, called the Spitting Llama. And we just saw a niche that wasn't filled and dove into it as something that we could do together. And that's also kind of how, I've been in real estate, is kind of opportunistic and seeing, what fits, basically. Then I realized that, I had only taken one econ class in my whole life, and I suddenly had 3 stores with 10 employees and this spider web of Excel sheets. And I didn't know what the heck I was doing, or at least I thought I didn't. I actually did, but you're kind of trained to think you don't, And so when we came back to the United States in 2009, it was kind of the bottom of the recession, which I hadn't really been participating in too much in Bolivia, but
right.
Went to business school, got my MBA, but after that went into nonprofit leadership and fundraising and development. So worked for 3.5 years for an organization called Safe Passage, which helps kids in the Guatemala City garbage dump go to school. Then moved on to Bowdoin College, kind of learned the finer points of raising a little bit more capital. Great experience. Got to meet people like Reed Hastings firsthand, CEO and just such a cool environment, and, great for, raising money professionally for, 8.5 years. I've transitioned that, into what I'm doing in real estate as well. So a lot of my experience is just working with teams, working with partners. And I started real estate investing in 2011 with a college friend. He came to me with this crazy idea where they were going to build like an 80-unit apartment building in Minneapolis, and it was going to earn like a 15% combined return between the, appreciation and dividends. And I only knew about stock investing. So I thought, this is too good to be true. If it came from anyone else, I would think it was a scam, but this is someone I trust, with my life. And I know he's not involved with, shady people. So I was like, sure, I'll give you a chunk of my savings here and let's, see how it goes. Because I thought to myself, even if it's only half as good as he says, 7%, that's great. No problem with that. So, and it turned out to be like 35% when all was said and done. It was a great building. They sold it in 2018, after a good 7-year run. And it was the market. The market was just an awesome time to, if you enter in 2011, it's pretty hard to lose if you're selling in 2018. So,
right. The longest bear run in history.
Yeah, I started as a passive investor. I only became active in 2013. My family and I bought a single family home, nearby in a town called Yarmouth as a rental. We replicated that in 2016, around when my wife got pregnant with our first child. And that was what really kicked me in the pants to get into real estate investing because, being in nonprofit development, you get paid enough to pay your bills, but you're not saving for college and trips and stuff like that. So I wanted to have a little bit freer lifestyle, and I didn't know how to do that with my current career. I'm kind of an outdoors people person, and fundraising is actually like 90% office and desk work with the occasional meeting of people. It's not all glad handing. So I was getting kind of ready to make a switch, and I just started diving into real estate. And, after the 2 single families, I bought a 3-unit that was mixed use. That turned me on to commercial, and I've since done, a bunch more of that. We've done 8 units of residential, 9 residential, mixed use 10 units, big office building, 16,000 square feet. So a bunch of different projects that take us up to about 94 units today.
Wow, that's quite the sizable portfolio in such a short amount of time. So that's quite exponential growth you've experienced from that very first single family.
Yeah, it's kind of builds on itself. My original plan was just like buy one apartment in Portland, own it for 15 years until it's paid off, and then sell it for the kids to go to college or something. And I kind of quickly realized that, no, you could do like one every year. And then, no, maybe you could actually double your holding every year if you're, being careful about it. And that's the thing, is that I don't think you should go from 0 to 60. I think it is worth kind of crawling before you walk, before you run. I listen to Grant Cardone, and he'll tell you to buy a 40 or 100 unit as your first acquisition. And, that's the great thing about real estate, is there's more than one way to, skin a cat. But I know what works for me is kind of step-by-step process, and it's not getting in over your head. It's not, jumping into the total deep end. You got to learn to swim first.
For sure. I totally agree. And maybe some people can, go right out of the gate. Maybe they're, well into their careers, or have, a sizable net worth that they can go and, enter in that, say, 40, 60, 80 unit apartment space, right? But for the everyday person, maybe buying that first single family house or starting with a duplex is a much more replicable and realistic entry into the real estate world. I think that's where most people find themselves, kind of like in your position at one point, Dave. Many people find themselves in a job, they're comfortable, but they want a little bit more. They don't exactly know how to grow their means. Now, obviously, everyone listening to this podcast has come across the world of real estate investing, right? And that's where we'll focus the conversation. But you were able to do just that and kind of grow and scale and have obviously a large amount of success in the real estate world. So tell us kind of about after that kind of first single family. It sounds like you started growing into that triplex, right? And scaling from there. So tell us what was going on in your mindset at the time.
Right. That's a great question. I wanted to develop passive income, so that I could be free to use my time how I felt it was best allocated. And that's still my goal, is to, build passive income. And now I'm actually getting some. It takes a long time, in a single family home. No matter how good of a deal you get, it's not going to set you up for life,
No.
So you will need to scale in some way or other, especially if you're buy and hold. If you're flipping or wholesaling and you're repeating a transaction, really quickly, many times, you can build up a good cash cushion. But I had a full-time day job and 1 kid and then 2 and, a life here. So I wanted something that could be slowly scaled up. So, I partnered, I had no track record and no money, and was lucky that, I was able to just spend a year learning, 2015, 16, I was just diving into learning about real estate through podcasts like yours, books, resources like that, to the point where, a family member, with some retirement funds in excess of what they needed, was willing to partner with me and said, okay, you do all the work, I'll put in all the money, we'll split the deal. If it's as good as your projections look like, even 50% of it's a pretty good return. And it's a different asset allocation outside of paper assets. Stocks and bonds are both paper. If the world, turns upside down, good luck collecting those from a closed brokerage or bank. Whereas building right down the street that you can see and touch and walk over and chat with a tenant, that's a totally different kind of asset, with different advantages and disadvantages from, tax and otherwise. So that was what really got me interested in pursuing real estate further. I did the 3-unit on my own. And, one of the beautiful things is that that was found on the MLS. A lot of people advertise and there's tons of different ways to find properties. Most of mine I've just found on the MLS mismarketed or mispositioned by brokers. And so this one was being sold as a single family home when in fact,
interesting.
it had 2 apartments up top and a commercial office space down below. So it really wasn't a single family home and it shouldn't have been priced like one. And so all the people looking for a home were like, oh, this doesn't feel right. It's weird. And all the people looking for an investment weren't looking at this, because it wasn't positioned as one. It had no income and expenses listed. It had no cap rate. It really wasn't well marketed. So, and you can find that, in really big buildings, surprisingly, much bigger than this. So that was a great, introduction for me. I was super hands-on, and by the time I got up to like 30 units, I had gotten, third-party property management. I couldn't manage them all myself while doing my day job, being with my family. And the experience of that was really important as well. I went from, one property manager who was kind of juggling too many juggling balls, and I switched to a more professional company. But I had put all my tenants on an online payment system called Cozy, which some of your listeners may.
I used it.
Yeah, exactly. Great software, for like small to medium landlords. But this new property management company was very old school, and they were used to knocking on doors and collecting cash and getting physical checks put in their box by people making drives to their offices. And they weren't able to incorporate Cozy into their accounting system. And it just, the wheels were falling off the bus less than a year into it. I was frustrated because, I confessed to being like an A student when I was in school. I tried hard. I tried to get good grades. And that's what I want for my real estate portfolio. I want good grades. I don't want C's and D's. That's not. So, an A+ is maybe unrealistic. But anyway, I decided I'd listened and learned enough, from shows like yours to know that a lot of people that scale up start their own management companies. And my good friend in Minnesota who was doing these apartment syndications explained to me, and it all kind of clicked. The management company is not a profit center. You're not going to earn extra and tons of money and save a ton by doing that. You'll save a little maybe. But what it is a risk management tool. And what it means is that if you have a unit sitting vacant, you don't need to wait a week or 2 or 3 to see if they can lower the price and see what price they might decide to lower it to and, feel like you're not the top priority. You can lower it today to a price where that you'll have 10 Craigslist people knocking on your door and one of them might have a 700 credit score.
Yeah, exactly. I like that perspective.
Yeah. And that to me, and it's about how you treat tenants too. Like I wasn't comfortable all the time with how the property management might have been treating them. And I would, complaints would kind of filter through once in a while or stuff like that. And, it's not usually like a warm and fuzzy, kind of field.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm kind of a warm and fuzzy guy. So I wanted to bring it in-house. And I reached out to my best friend from the MBA program, Brian Sprague, who, is now a retired lieutenant commander from the Navy. At that time, he was in the active reserves, flying to South Korea, doing planning and stuff like that. But he was looking for a full-time job. And, at that time in 2019, when he was finally retiring, it was a perfect fit, because he had a background in logistics and operations and plannings. He'd never touched property management or real estate investing, so it's been a huge learning experience for us. But we partnered up, formed Katahdin Property Management as a joint venture, basically, where, just like I did with my parents, he does all the work and gets all the money. I put the capital in, to start the company because I had it finally at that point, and it doesn't take much. But the key to it was just that finally I had control. I had control over all the units. I had real confidence that they were being treated right, and we were going to really bounce back. And sure enough, the vacancies went away pretty quickly. And all the tenants who, like the heroin dealer that a prior landlord had accepted left. And we started screening for criminal background and things of that nature. Not to say that neither of the prior folks screened, but it was pretty imperfect. And, when you buy a building, as you know, Jacob, you inherit tenants, and it's often not the tenants that you yourself might have accepted with the credit scores and, criminal backgrounds that you might want. And that's one of the main challenges of real estate, I think, is, you're kind of dealt a hand each time you buy an occupied building. And how do you navigate, those personalities and rents, and how do you try to get it up to market? I've seen different ways of doing it. There's the kick everyone out onto the curb and just, reposition it or gut it, or, that works in some ways for some people. That's just definitely not me. I'm much more of a scalpel, not a hatchet kind of.
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
So, it's interesting, in a lot of the units we found like a senior citizen on a fixed income who just doesn't want to move. I'm the kind of owner or landlord who's just going to keep them for a while, and let them be under market and just take that as, we'll find them a better place in the future, where they are maybe subsidized or something like that if this isn't the right spot for them. But I'm not going to kick them out because they're, 20% under market or something like that.
Yeah.
But other people, the people who have dual incomes and, they've been paying 20% under market, like, yeah, we're going to work on that and get you to a fair price.
Yeah, sure. Dave, at what point did you kind of turn this real estate investing thing from like a side hustle to like, you're now treating like a bona fide business, vertically integrated in-house property management? It sounds like you eventually got to a point where you're bringing on investor capital. So talk about that transition.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I always partnered with investors. I mean, only one of the 14 buildings in my portfolio is one that I exclusively own all on my own.
Okay.
All 2/3, 1/3, 10%, 50%, it all just depends. So I've really been able to partner because I started with no money and,
you used to having no money
when you do that. So, there's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I'm at. I want to go far. I want to do it fairly quickly, but not too fast. So I started by just partnering with individual people, close friends or family, often the same people, because you develop a trust, you develop a rapport. They see, hey, checks are coming in, this is real, a track record. And it was only when I was getting closer to really knowing that I was going to leave my full-time day job that I did syndication and pooled money from 10 different investors to buy, about $1 million property, Brunswick, the town, where I was working. And that, came about because I was inspired by shows like yours. I had seen, what my friend in Minnesota was doing and how great of a way it was to kind of give average, ordinary people a way to make extraordinary, returns on their investment and to diversify their investments and to actually do something really concrete for the world. Because when you invest, in the S&P 500 index fund, like a good millennial, like we are, you're not really doing anything good for the world. I mean, you might do something good for yourself if the gamble works, which, over time it probably will. But, I don't believe that's the best or only way, to invest. And a lot of my investors are very similar stage in life or mindset where they want to see kind of good things happen with their money. If you give it to a big random corporation, even if they do great, your couple thousand or whatever didn't matter that much. And it's a secondary market to begin with. So, working with investors has been really fun. It grew very organically from just high school and college friends and friends I knew from growing up. And now we're kind of at the point where friends of friends of friends are, finding out about me and coming to me. And, it's not the right fit for everyone. Some people want the kind of quick turnaround, the 1-year refi. And, we did a project recently where we are going to refi in the first couple of years and do a really good return, for that. But most of the projects I'm doing, are long-term buy and holds, not necessarily even a sale projected at, year 5, 7, or 10.
Right.
As much as using refi as the cash out, strategy. So we're only cashing out 70 to 80%, but we're doing it every 5 years, or every 7 years. And I think that can actually be a better way to go because one of the things I've learned, from shows like yours, listening to the really experienced, smart investors, one thing they all have in common, they all say, they regret selling their buildings. They regret it because it's worth double now or triple. If they had just held it, it would be worth so much more. And, I already am seeing that from some of the properties, I bought 3-4 years ago. There's the temptation to sell as soon as you're up 10%, just be like, yeah, baby, 10%, that's a lot of money. And you realize that transactional mindset can actually get in the way. And I think in a way, 1031s almost do the real estate investor a disservice by tempting you to swap out too soon. And people don't think about the transaction costs involved. I mean, yeah, they'll think about the brokerage fees and the actual money you pay. But one of the things they don't think about is the operational ease with which you can manage and control the risk in a property. So if I've owned a property for a year, the properties that you and all your listeners right now, if you've owned it for a year or two, you've probably got a pretty good handle on it.
Yeah.
You probably know the tenants or the manager who knows the tenants and, you've got things under control. And as soon as you 1031, tabula rasa, clean slate. You were starting from scratch, and that can be good or bad, but it's definitely new and different. And there's often a cost, and it's a time cost. It's a frustration cost. It's a new bank account. It's all these different payment systems and setups that if you had just refied a few years down the line and kept the same thing going until you really run out of depreciation, that might be just as lucrative of a strategy. So that's sort of where I'm at. Obviously, if someone comes to me with a ludicrous offer for a property that I can't refuse, like The Godfather, I may have to take it. But for now, the investors I'm working with, we're looking for stable cash flows. And it's really about, that quarterly cash flow that we generate for investors. It's about being positive month over month and keeping a reasonable LTV, in the properties in the portfolio as well. So that especially at a time like this, it's not the time to be 100% leverage. It's really not, even though the money's cheap and it's out there, the bottom could fall out any minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard this kind of analogy when talking about selling a property. People kind of use the question of like, well, I spent all this time, looking for a property and then putting the deal together and raising the capital. And I spent all this time and effort and energy and resources on buying the deal. Why would I sell it just a mere 5 years later to realize, like you said, as soon as I hit a 10 or 15 or 18% return, would I not refinance it, leave a little bit of equity in the property, and then keep that velocity of money moving onto another property and another? And that's how it sounds like you've grown to scale to the portfolio you have today.
That's the goal. And I'm just doing my first refi now, because I was always trying to lock in long fixed rates, which I still think is a good idea. Although I no longer would necessarily recommend that you fix the loan for longer than you think you would want to refi. Because it turns out, even though the bank may say that's all well and good at the outset, 5 or 7 years later, they might want to charge you a fee to refi, or something like that. So, I've learned that, and this is another thing that I didn't know as a beginner, that there's 3 things that are critical in real estate. And, each is like less obvious than the other. The first one is like the building and location. Like that's totally critical. You can't buy a bad building in a bad location. The second that's a little less obvious are the people in the building, the tenants. Like a great building with bad tenants could be a terrible investment.
Yeah, right.
And vice versa, so building with great tenants could be a great investment. So the people, are the second less obvious thing. But then the third that really took me a while to learn is that the financing is as important as the location and the tenants. It really is. It's the biggest cost and biggest factor of your investment. When you look at your, monthly expenses, there shouldn't be anything bigger than your, principal and interest. And if you're escrowing taxes and insurance and that kind of thing, which I always say, hey, if the bank will take that headache off your plate and do it for you for free, take advantage of that. For all the 30-year fixed loans, banks typically will do that and want to. The financing is such a critical part, and learning about the implications of fixed terms, the implications of amortization, 20-year versus 25-year, huge difference in your cash flow, bigger difference than a lot of your utilities or those kind of things. Learning about, the total period of the loan, like after 5 years, are you going to be high and dry and have to go on your knees to the bank to get another loan in the bottom of the worst recession ever? Or do you actually have a 20 or 25-year loan period that can refix every 5 years or go variable? These are really important factors to your investment that I just never knew about. I was like, oh yeah, just get a loan from a banker, and I didn't shop. I didn't shop around. And each time that I've done a bigger deal, I've like doubled the amount of banks that I've talked to. I've gone from 1 to 2 or 3 to 5 or 6 or 7 to now like 15 banks. And I always recommend local banks. I don't really work with the Wells Fargos and, banks that have, billion-dollar criminal charges against them and stuff.
Yeah, fair.
Anyone listening who might work for those institutions, but I'm just kind of a local guy. And I think keeping money in your own community is awesome. And, if what hits the fan, you really want to be able to walk into a human being that and have a relationship with, you can explain the story. And then you might get your loan deferral. Whereas if you're just emailing Bank of America, good luck, man.
Yeah.
You're a number to them. You're just liquidity to them. If they need liquidity, they're going to find a way in your loan covenants to make it do. That's what the lawyers tell me. And I believe them. And we saw it in '08, and I think we will see it soon, in 2021. So, I'm a big believer in local banks, in working with different ones, because sometimes a bank is hungry, to give out money and loan it out. They've got too much, Other times they're not hungry. They don't want to loan out, and they express that in the rate and terms they're giving you. Some banks like, that kind of deal and that kind of location. Others don't. And again, they'll express that in the rate and terms they're offering you. And getting to know the people in the banks and which banks are looking for what is just a whole new world that I didn't know about. But it's huge. Getting a good interest rate, a good amortization, good terms. I mean, that is really key to the success of anyone's portfolio long term.
I completely agree. Having the ability to leverage real estate is one of the many benefits that come with the space and the territory, right? Now, to some people who are new to the world of real estate investing, debt might still seem like a bad term. I hope that I've talked about this enough on the podcast at this point, with 340 plus episodes in, talking about the powers of debt and leverage, that many of the audience members are probably pro-debt minded. But if we've got anybody new tuning into the show, the power to be able to place debt on a property and have the tenants source that debt for you is so powerful. And that's really where you get the main benefit of investing in real estate, among many others, like tax benefits and depreciation and cash flows and so on, right? But leverage, I couldn't talk enough about it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it really clicked with me because I was, a nerd growing up. I would play a lot of board games and strategy games. And a lot of those games are based around building your productive capacity the fastest, and getting that wheel turning that starts spinning off, the units or utility or soldiers or whatever it is you need to win the game. It's that wheel turning. And that's what a building is. It's that thing that produces for you. Robert Kiyosaki put it really well, I thought, where, he basically said, all right, if you buy something for $1 that pays you $1.10, how many of those can you afford to own? And the answer is infinite. That's a good thing. There's no maximum of what you can do as long as it is cash flowing. But that is really the key. And I think that's the danger that people can get into, is if you're over leveraged and your units are not in a kind of low risk profile, all it takes is one or two vacancies to take you down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is dangerous. So I think it is important to realize that real estate can be wonderful, but it's not just a magic bullet that, no matter what you do with it, you'll turn out okay. And I think a lot of people had that idea, in 06, 07, they just saw everything going up double-digit percentages every year. And I do feel like in this depression, which is what I think it will be, unfortunately, in the years to come, real estate won't be the culprit quite as badly, because we got so badly burned the last time, and we were so reformed, with Dodd-Frank and all these different things that came after the Great Recession, that banks haven't been as loosey-goosey with real estate. And thus, I don't think there'll be quite the same calamity with it. But inevitably, the rate of loan deferral right now and delinquency is higher than it was at the peak of the Great Recession. And yet the rate of foreclosure is non-existent. It's normal, So those two realities can't coexist forever.
Right. With all the mortgage forbearance and eviction moratoriums. And yeah. Well, Dave, I know you're a big proponent of doing good in the communities you invest in. And as real estate investors, we're first tasked with solving problems, but secondly, creating win-win solutions. And that goes across the board, from creating win-win solutions with our residents, creating win-win solutions with our investors, with our team members, our partners, our lenders, all the many people that are, part of this real estate investing team you build. Talk about how you've been able to do that in your own portfolio, in your own life.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's two areas that I want to talk about. One is working with new immigrants, and the other is energy efficiency, which are both kind of topics that I think a lot of people forget about. With new immigrants, it just kind of fell onto me by chance, where Portland, Maine got a big influx of immigrants, asylum seekers coming, from Angola and Congo, seeking a better life in the United States. They all heard that Maine was a great place to be. So they came to Portland with, no possessions, no money. And, we were housing them, in the basketball team's, court, basically. The Expo Center got made into an emergency shelter. This was the summer of 2019. And I just thought, I want to help. I want to help these people start, their life here and create the American dream. I mean, that's what this country is all about. So I called up the city and was just like, hey, I happen to have a vacancy right now. I'm a landlord. And, I don't need the credit and background and all the usual stuff. I don't even need them to be able to pay rent right away, as long as there's a way they can pay it soon.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this for free. I can't run a charity, but is there any way, that could work out? And I just kind of left it open-ended. And sure enough, they had a family from Rwanda that was in a shelter. They had come legally with visas. They had work permits. They came to my unit. The city paid their first month's rent. The local town paid the next month. And by the third month, Jacob, they had like 4 jobs between the two of them, and they were paying market rent. They've been some of my best tenants ever. He learned to drive. He got a car. His kid's in the same daycare with ours now. And it has just been really gratifying to see that process of how you can go in this country from nothing. I mean, just, you're surviving a genocide, getting out of your country, fleeing, crossing the Rio Grande with your kids in your back, to, working 2 jobs, owning a car, paying taxes in the space of like 3 months. And landlords, can make that happen. And we've done that 5 times now. We're just literally today moving in another Angolan family to a different building. And, it's been really great. People can donate, use stuff, help outfit the units. And it was a way for people who wanted to help but didn't know how. And you just see these terrible headlines. I think immigration is just a politicized, bad rap kind of issue. But almost anyone listening to this, unless you're completely Native American, we all came here at one point and needed some help at one point. And it's really gratifying to be able to do that, and give that help to people. So, and you get paid for it. I tell people, like, I'm not running a charity. Like, I'm collecting rent every month, from the tenants. And they're great tenants. They might take a little more education, a little more hand-holding at first, but, they're good, hardworking, honest people. And it's been a great experience. So, that's been awesome working with immigrants. And then, with energy efficiency, one of the big things that people don't think about is that's one of your biggest expenses up north. Here in Maine, I mean, the heating bill is huge. That can be a deal killer. And I've bought several buildings where they're not only heating the apartments and the first and second floors, they're heating the basement because it's so poorly insulated that the pipes will freeze if they don't. And some buildings, that's all they're heating. I mean, I've had buildings that are paying $4,000 or $6,000 a year just to heat the basement that keeps the pipes from freezing. And all you have to do is bring in an insulation company, do spray foam around all the walls of the basement, get the air sealed, the doors and windows, so you'll spend, maybe $5,000 to $10,000 doing that on an average, 5 or 10 unit apartment building up here. But that's what you're paying almost every winter. So the return on investment can be 50 to 100% right off the bat. That's pretty hard to do, anywhere.
Yeah, right.
And you turbocharge your NOI because literally on so many of my performers, that big, $4,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year heating bill, just cross it off. It's done. Because what we do is we either stop heating the basement, the tenants were already paying their own heat, or if we're heating all the tenant units, what we'll do is put in a heat pump into each unit. So these cost, $3,000 to $5,000 each, similar to a Rinnai heater, but they have the benefit of filtering the air. They dehumidify and they can provide AC in the summer, as you probably love down there where you guys are. So, it's a win-win. It's an amenity that you can brag about, in your listing. The tenant pays the electric bill in almost every case in Maine. So if the heat's electric, the tenant's paying the heat. So you get that line item off of, your calling. Are you getting the same benefit, but you can outcompete, the other buildings that are including heat, in their cost, and your NOI is higher for it. So it's really, to me, a win-win situation. There's great rebates in a lot of the northern states, for heat pumps, and they work great. My house has 2 of them. That's all we use for heat. It's been negative 20 Fahrenheit outside. We're like 75 and tropical Bolivian temperatures inside. So it's an awesome thing.
I love it. Yeah, just 2 great examples there, Dave, of how a real estate investor can do good in one's community and, kind of couple that technology, that kind of innovation along with, that capital improvement aspect, not to mention, what you're doing with, providing housing to immigrants. Such a feel-good story there. It's awesome to see people come here and get on their feet, especially with just kind of the news in today's world, right? Lots of negative stigma around immigration and things like that. But that's awesome. It just goes to show that real estate investors, landlords aren't this Scrooge McDuck hanging out in their penthouse mansion, just, all in it for themselves. So glad to see you doing that for the rest of us.
Yeah, it's been gratifying. And that was the thing that clicked for me, actually. I had that prejudice or stigma against real estate. I just associated it, with like the greedy landlord, it's like a parody. And it was when I finally kind of clicked to me as like, not only like I can make my own house really green, I can put solar panels and heat pumps in there and try to help climate change that way. But one little house is not going to do that much. But if I build a portfolio of hundreds of units and we actually make money doing this, that can change the whole world. And so that's why I want to teach people about how to do that. There's a lot of different ways, we haven't talked about. People can research online that they make great sense. Not all of them. I mean, you don't necessarily want Andersen windows in your rental units, but there's a lot of great ways that landlords can do well by doing good and still, get a great return on their investment.
Yeah. Here in Houston, Texas, sometimes we do have to turn our heaters down in our brutal winters down here when it gets to that, mid 50 degrees outside, but we tend to survive.
Ooh, man. 50 is like, I'll go from tank top to t-shirt.
Well, Dave, hey, it's been a lot of fun talking with you, learning about how you've kind of, journeyed into the world of real estate investing, turned it from a side hustle to your full-time business now, treating it like such, vertically integrated with your property management, your rental portfolio, and just doing good for the community. It's awesome to see. It's been a lot of fun talking with you. As we're wrapping up here, we like to end with every guest with the lightning round, just a series of questions we fire at you. Are you up for it?
Let's bring it on. Let's do it.
All right. The first question is, what was your biggest hurdle getting started investing in real estate? And then what'd you do to overcome that?
Great question. I think for me, it was having no capital, no real money to put down. And, I partnered with family that had that and were willing to believe in me and, take a chance after I had, put it at of learning. I had time, but I had no money. So I had to be a little creative. And that's, how I solved that problem.
Yeah, been there. Well, Dave, do you have a personal habit that contributes to your success?
I think it's staying positive. I think it's just being positive to other people, positive on life. It really is. If you have good energy and you're positive, I think you can do almost anything. And the inverse is true. If you're negative and you're down, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
So other good habits will come from that first kind of attitude piece of it.
I like that. Well, how about an online resource you find valuable in your day-to-day?
I want to give you a couple because they're so good.
Okay.
One is an app called Genius Scan, which is a free scanner for documents. And so anytime you get something in the mail and you need to digitize it and send it out, it not only takes the picture, but it formats it. It looks like an amazingly perfect scan. Awesome app. Rental Hero is online accounting software that just kicks the butt of QuickBooks, and it's way cheaper, way better for rental properties. So I used to use Rental Hero for everything. I mean, now that I own a property management company, we went to Buildium, which is okay, not great. Now we're with Appfolio, which we love. So they have their own kind of built-in accounting suite. So I'm not using Rental Hero anymore. But for anyone, just sort of landlording, I think Rental Hero is awesome. Cozy, like we mentioned. And then finally, Bigger Pockets online, I think is a great resource.
Awesome.
Sorry, that
No, that's great. We'll link all those resources in the show notes that you mentioned. Thanks for that. Dave, what book would you recommend to the listeners and why?
Well, I'm a bibliophile too, Jacob. My house is full of books. It's a problem. So I couldn't.
Bibliophile. I like it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I've written a couple books too. So
yes.
We can talk again. But a great one that I've never heard on a real estate investing podcast is called Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard. He's the founder of Patagonia, the clothing company.
Yeah, okay.
And it is a dynamite business book. And it teaches you this sustainable growth. And he has his MBA management style, management by absence. Well, he'll just go climb a mountain in Patagonia, tell his team, deal with it while I'm gone. I'm not going to be here to answer phones for a month. Lead. And it's that delegation to your team, that I think he teaches. And then another great one that I'm halfway through right now is called Investment Biker by Jim Rogers. Yeah, he's a famous investor in the world. He kind of quit Wall Street and then motorcycled, from Europe through Asia and all over, and is just kind of giving his economic observations around. So those are both not directly related to real estate, but I think they're part of those mindset books, like the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that can really help you get a firm base.
Great. Those are both new to me, so I'll definitely check them out. We'll link both of those in the show notes for audience members. Dave, last question, and then the lightning round is, if you were to go back and give advice to your 20-year-old self to get started investing in real estate, what would you tell 20-year-old Dave?
Yeah, that's another question I love on your show. Well, first of all, I don't think I should have started at 20. Some people should, but I don't think I was ready. I would have warned myself about the recession. I would have told myself, hey, in 08 to 2011, just buy like there's no tomorrow. Yeah. But in all seriousness, what I would have done is tried to erase some of that stigma against landlords. and say, this is actually not just a money-making car sales kind of avenue. This is a way that you can change the world, be a good neighbor to hundreds of people. And I think it's really a area where anyone can make a great difference. So I think it was that, again, mindset piece. I think young people should travel. You don't necessarily want to be tying yourself down at 20 with tons of properties unless it's right for you. But for me, I think by 25 or 30, then it was right for me.
I love it. Well, Dave, hey, it's been so much fun talking with you on the podcast. You obviously are very active in your market. I'm sure people reach out to you all the time and want to connect further with you. If people are listening in and want to, continue the conversation, reach out, look you up, where's the best place for them to find you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a commercial broker in Maine. You can reach me at holmanhomes.com. So that's HOLMANHOMES.com. And then our property management company is katahdinmanagement.com. That's that Mount Katahdin is the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. So Mainers, your wife or fiance, will know.
Yes. Okay. I'll have to hit her with some trivia.
Yeah, it's spelled KATAHDIN, then the word management.com.
All right. For all the people that are struggling with that word like I am, I'll link it in the show notes. But hey, Dave, it's been so much fun talking with you. Really inspiring to see what you're doing in the world of real estate investing, how you're being a great real estate investor, giving back to the communities, creating win-win scenarios. Really inspiring for everybody listening in, I'm sure. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Look forward to having you back on in the near future.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this show. It's a great service for so many people. So I appreciate what you do and have a great day.
Thanks so much, Dave. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast, providing you actionable content to build your real estate empire. Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for personal advice. The opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have a potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom, LLC, exclusively.